Good evening. Leading the news this Friday, thousands of mourners attended the funeral of former Indian Prime Minister Gandhi. The Senate voted President Bush special authority to negotiate a free trade agreement with Mexico, and the United States helped Israel in the airlift of thousands of Ethiopian Jews. We'll have the details in our news summary in a moment. Robin?
After the news summary, we have a conversation with outgoing CIA Director William Webster, the weekly political analysis of David Gergen and Mark Shields. Kwame Holman reports on new questions raised about a life-saving medical procedure. Finally, we meet a photographer who's found his way to make a difference.
Funding for the NewsHour has been provided by AT&T. AT&T has supported the MacNeil Lehrer NewsHour since 1983 because quality information and quality communication is our idea of a good connection. AT&T, the right choice. And by PepsiCo. And made possible by the financial support of viewers like you and the Corporation for Public Broadcasting.
Rajiv Gandhi was cremated today in a traditional Hindu ceremony. As many as 250,000 people came out to mourn the former Prime Minister slain in a bomb attack on Tuesday. We have a report from Edward Sturton of Independent Television News.
Arms reversed, all three services forming up for the Guard of Honor, the formality with which the state pays tribute to a former Prime Minister. But the people of India wanted to show their feelings for a leader who was more than a politician to them. As his body was brought out to be laid on a gun carriage, they almost overwhelmed those guarding it. Rajiv's widow, with her private grief, lost in the crowd. A slow march, and the procession left the house where the Gandhi dynasty began, the home of Nehru, Rajiv's grandfather. The people of Delhi had come to bid farewell to the man whose death may mark the end of that dynasty. Everywhere along the route, anywhere they could find to stand. They filled the Rajput, centre of Indian government since the days of British rule. Rajiv Gandhi sat here for half a decade as Prime Minister, and this looked at times almost like yet another of those many triumphal Gandhi election celebrations which India has so often seen since independence. A helicopter scattered petals on the crowd. For many of those beneath, the government has always meant the Gandhis. But the grief of the old affected the young. This generation will grow up under a new political order. Only at the funeral pyre was the body of Rajiv returned for a while to the attentions of his family. His son Rahul, a student in America, being guided through the ritual by a Hindu priest. And daughter-comforted mother, Sonia Gandhi, may soon be back at the center of India's turbulent election campaign. But for today, she has been a widow doing her Hindu duty. Rajiv Gandhi's death had drawn friends and admirers from all over the world. Prince Charles was here, and close by, the Palestinian leader, Yasser Arafat. Cremation is the traditional form of Hindu funeral. Hindus believe that fire frees the soul, and it's said the soul hovers by the ashes for 13 days while it's judged by the gods. Rajiv Gandhi was sometimes harshly judged by his political opponents, but he is likely to be remembered above all as one of democracy's martyrs.
The United States was represented at the funeral by Vice President Quayle. In Washington, President Bush went to the Indian embassy this morning to offer his condolences. He signed the condolence book and said he was not worried about the future of democracy in India. He said Indian democracy remains strong and steadfast. Jim?
The Senate today gave President Bush the authority to negotiate trade agreements that cannot be amended by Congress. In a 59-36 vote, the Senate extended so-called fast-track authority for another 2 years. The House approved the plan yesterday. Mr. Bush called the vote the best economic news in months. He said it in a Boston speech.
Through fast track, I really believe everybody wins. In a world built upon free trade, every nation has a vested interest in the prosperity of its trading partners. After all, you can't export to a nation that is suffering from economic depression. Free and fair trade builds ties of mutual interest. It lays down a foundation for peace and for prosperity right here in our hemisphere and throughout the world.
Critics of the legislation included many labor unions, consumer groups, and environmentalists. They argued a free trade agreement would cost American jobs if companies relocated to Mexico for lower wages and looser environmental laws.
A relief force of 24, mostly U.S. soldiers, arrived in the northern Iraqi city of Dohuk today. Their mission is to restore electricity and other basic services. Dohuk was home to some 300,000 Kurds before their failed uprising against the government of Saddam Hussein. The Allies hope the restoration of city services will convince more than 100,000 Kurdish refugees to return from their camps near the Turkish border. Iraqi troops and police agreed to vacate the city and allow the Allies in.
An airlift of Jews from Ethiopia to Israel began today. White House spokesman Marlon Fitzwater said in Washington the United States is assisting in the operation. He said President Bush got approval from ousted Ethiopian President Mengistu's successor. The operation is aimed at evacuating all of Ethiopia's 18,000 Jews to Israel in the next 2 days. Ethiopia's new president, Tesfaye Gebre-Kidan, met with Western ambassadors in Addis Ababa as rebel forces moved to within 8 miles of the city. The rebels have said they would not try to take the capital before U.S.-mediated peace talks begin Monday in London.
That's our summary of the news. Ahead on the NewsHour, outgoing CIA Director Webster, Gergen and Shields, new questions about kidney dialysis, and ghetto life through ghetto eyes.
William Webster is our lead story tonight. He announced his retirement 2 weeks ago as Director of Central Intelligence. He took over the CIA 4 years ago after being Director of the FBI and before that a federal judge. Judge Webster, welcome.
Thank you, Jim.
You were brought from the FBI to the CIA to clean up the CIA after the Iran-Contra scandal. Is it in fact a clean agency now in any way you want to use that term?
I believe it's a clean agency by my definition, and I think it was a clean agency then. Individuals were under clouds because they had been taking orders outside the agency, and there were a number of problems there. It's a dedicated agency by people who want to follow the rules. They need to understand what the rules are, and I think that's what we've been working on the last 4 years.
And you feel they do understand that now?
I do.
And you're turning over to your successor, who may be Bob Gates, who worked for you for a while as Deputy Director, an agency that is free of all of the problems that it had as a result of Iran-Contra and before that?
I'm confident that that's so. I think I'm turning over a healthy organization that feels good about itself and is not turned inward or defensive and is prepared to serve the nation.
The stories since you announced your retirement have had an interesting theme that you've been hailed as a rare and special thing in Washington, as an honest man, as a Mr. Clean. Why is an honest man seen as such a rarity here?
I don't know, because almost everybody that I deal with meets that qualification. Most people in Washington are here to serve. Some come to make a career in government. Some come as elected representatives, either in the executive branch or in the Congress. And some, like myself, think of coming on loan. It's been a pretty long loan for me, but I think it makes a good bridge to have private citizens on loan for a period. But all of us come to serve, and that's a good beginning.
But were you not struck by that as well, that here is, I mean, I'm sure you were complimented by it, but also rather strange that here you were singled out for praise because you had integrity, you were honest, you were clean as compared to everyone else? It seems these stories seem to be suggesting.
Well, I don't know what they're suggesting. Of course, it's a compliment to be on the right side of the ledger, but so are most of the good men and women I work with here.
Has it been difficult for you to maintain your integrity and honesty as Director of CIA and head of the FBI?
Not for a minute. I think coming off the bench had something to do with that, because I never found myself under pressure to do something that I believe was wrong. In fact, most of the comments coming from the executive branch, calls from the White House or others over the long years, always were prefaced of, if this isn't correct, tell me about it, or if we shouldn't be asking for this, tell me about it.
Well, specifically as far as the CIA is concerned, did you ever feel pressure to trim an intelligence opinion or recommendation or assessment to be in accordance with the position of the administration?
I never felt pressured because part of the commitment that I made to the Congress, to the Senate when I came on board, and of course to the President, was that our information was going to be timely, useful, and objective, and that we'd put in place procedures that would protect not only me, I didn't feel under pressure, but the various components of the intelligence community from any kind of pressure from the political department heads whom they served in a direct way. And I found that while occasionally there would be mumbling about should we be part of this process, no one ever forced the issue over time. I haven't heard of it for a long, long time.
Well, as I'm sure you know, several Democratic senators were critical of you during the build-up or the lead-up to the war, that your assessment as far as how effective sanctions would be against Iraq. They said that they suggested very strongly that you said one thing and then kind of trimmed it a little bit when the administration and the president kind of backed off of the effectiveness of sanctions.
Let me make a couple of comments on that. First of all, I don't think those senators really read my testimony alongside my letter. They are completely consistent. The other thing is that I should say for the record, although you haven't asked me, that no one at the White House asked me to change my testimony. They knew what my testimony was. No one at the White House edited or asked me to change the letter. The letter reflected the intelligence community's unanimous view of the condition of sanctions. What I said in my original testimony, if you have time to hear it, was that sanctions alone, there was no guarantee that sanctions alone would do the job within the time frames necessary, that it required a combination of military threat, economic sanctions, and the possible political reactions inside Baghdad that would bring pressure on Saddam Hussein. When it came time to write the letter, we were able to observe the conditions, the effect of sanctions, which were significant, but not on the military. And I said so. And I said that the effect on the military would not be significant if they had time to sit there, because they were not exercising their equipment. And I think that those statements, along with the other ones contained in the letter, were absolutely consistent with the first letter. But it was unfortunate that this letter had to come in the middle of a political battle, and I think people didn't stop to read it. They remembered the headlines in one of the newspapers, but not my testimony itself.
Whatever anybody thinks, your conscience is clear, is what you're saying.
My conscience is not only clear, but I think the fact that Saddam Hussein sat there for 6 weeks in the heaviest military bombardment in history and didn't move sustains the view that we have that economic sanctions would not cause him to leave Kuwait within a few months' time.
How do you view the record of the agency as far as as far as predicting what the fallout from the war was going to be, the uprising, the Kurds, and what happened to the Kurds? What's the record look like on that? If we had access to the record, what would it say?
I think the record looks good on that. Not only did we make those predictions during the war, we made them before the war began, because good analysts try to take a number of scenarios. What kind of victory? What kind of outcome? And for this particular type of outcome, we predicted there would be civil unrest inside Iraq of the kind that did in fact occur. Now, we didn't attempt, nor do I think we could have quantified it, to say there'd be 800,000 refugees. We did say that sort of thing would occur. There was some surprise, I think, for all of us, because the last time, after Saddam Hussein had used gas on the Kurds, only 60,000 people had gone north. In retrospect, probably they remembered, and they were afraid, and that's why more of them went north.
Did the president, before he called on the people of Iraq to rise up to protest and to rise up and revolt against Saddam Hussein, ask you all what you thought the result of that rise up would be? Could in fact be successful and get rid of Saddam Hussein?
Jim, I don't recall the president saying anything that called for revolution. I think what he said was, our quarrel is not with Iraq, it is with Saddam Hussein. And we hope the people of Iraq will take that into account. Now, he wasn't talking about Kurds, and he wasn't talking about Shias. He was talking generally about those who had the ability to change government. But the resolutions of the United Nations did not call for the removal of Saddam Hussein. It called for him to go back into Kuwait, and the president was following, leave Kuwait and go back into Iraq, and the president was following the UN resolutions.
Another thing that's been much talked about since you announced your retirement is, what about the CIA in the 1990s and going into the next century? Many people have suggested, in fact, that it may be obsolete. It's an agency set up to combat the communist threat from the Soviet Union and the Eastern Bloc that no longer exists. So what happens now? What do you think should be the new CIA, and what it should be, and what it should look like, and what it should do?
I have to talk about the entire intelligence community, because the CIA is only part of the effort, and a very important part. It's the Central Intelligence Agency, but others are participating in a look at the world that has changed dramatically. Even in the 4 years that I have been in office, it's changed dramatically. I think intelligence, good intelligence, has never been more essential than at the present time, but it's a different kind of need, and we are positioned to supply a different and, I think, more flexible and broadly based type of intelligence. The Soviet Union is still an important object for examination. We need to have an encyclopedic understanding of the very dynamic and in many ways unsettling situation there as the various republics seek autonomy, as Gorbachev's future becomes more and more uncertain, as the far right strives to maintain order in ways that may not be reformist, and reformists are seeking to go the other ways. We've got to keep track of that. That's different than the old stand-up military ground war offensive threat that they posed for so many years. Our indications and warnings now will give us up to 3 to 4 months before the Soviets could possibly engage in that type of threat. So the threat is less one of war against us, but an awareness that they possess important strategic weapons, the only country in the world capable of destroying us. We need to see what's going to happen to those weapons. We need to follow with arms control devices the agreements that our two countries have reached with each other on possession of strategic weapons. So it's a different kind of focus. And all around the world, we're seeing dramatic regional disputes. We're seeing opportunities as Eastern European countries really work hard at reform and trying to achieve democracy. As we see bubbling in the continent of Africa, we see pressures in North and South Korea, the old problems between India and Pakistan. There's no part of the world that does not implicate the national security of this country.
But to implicate the national security is one thing, but to threaten the national security of this country, there are not very many. Any of those people, any of those countries you named could not threaten the national security of the United States, could they, including the Soviet Union at this point?
Well, threat means something sudden and war, but we're looking at more than war these days. We're looking at economic competitiveness, how other countries support their own private sector in competition in the free market. We're looking at a number of transnational issues. Narcotics affects us all. You called it a threat. I call it a threat to our national security, not only in terms of what it does to our citizens, but the instability it causes countries that are friends of ours. The proliferation of missiles, chemical weapons, biological weapons in the third world is a threat to peace, and therefore a threat to our role in the world as the remaining superpower.
You mentioned economic matters. Some countries already use their intelligence services to spy on the United States and other countries to get economic secrets. Do you think the CIA ought to get in that business?
The CIA ought to contribute to the understanding of our policymakers of the major economic factors taking place in the world. That is not industrial espionage. But it's important for us to know the strategies of major countries affecting agreements. It's important for us to know the extent to which other countries are seeking to steal our secrets.
And they're doing it, aren't they, right and left?
Some are. You bet they are. And
how does that work? I mean, the country actually sends the counterpart. Let's say, well, I won't use any examples unless you will, but let's say country X wants to steal some kind of computer secret from the United States. I mean, they actually send agents in here and do that, do they not?
In the old days, the Soviet Union used surrogates out of the Warsaw Bloc countries to come, and they did it very effectively. Those groups are now largely on our side, so we have to look more carefully to see whether the KGB and the GRU is engaged in what we call technology transfer. Other countries are apt to get closer to industrial espionage by black bag jobs and searching of portfolios of businessmen traveling abroad, so it cuts both ways.
And the CIA is involved in that, right? I mean,
we're not involved in doing that.
All right.
We're involved. We and the FBI. The FBI has the primary responsibility in this country and does it beautifully.
You were head of the FBI before you came to the CIA. A lot of people would suggest that there are actually more domestic threats to the security of this country right now, social problems, crime, and other things, than there are from outside. How would you weigh those?
Well, it's difficult for me to weigh. I'm not supposed to be collecting domestic intelligence,
right.
So I have to rely on talking to Judge Sessions and others. Clearly, the threat of drugs, clearly the threat of organized crime, and often organized crime involved in drugs, major white-collar crime, major swindles that we're all aware of, all of these affect the quality of life in this country, and that is part of the responsibility of the FBI. Some of the things that are domestic have major international connections, such as narcotics, and we link very closely these days with the FBI, and our cooperation with them has never been better, in my view and in their view.
Finally, personal, what are your plans? What are you going to do now?
Well, you know, my roots have always been in the law, and my experiences have been heavily influenced by that, and I'm looking forward to practicing law and having more time to support legal institutions, organizations that I served in the past.
Stay here in Washington?
Stay here in Washington. Daniel Webster said that justice was the great interest of man on earth, and I think he was right.
You going to write a tell-all memoir?
No plans to do that. No plans at all.
A lot of people who, lay people would say, my goodness, here is William Webster, was head of the FBI, head of the CIA. His head must be full of secrets. Are there things that you're going to carry out of office that are terrific burdens that you know that you think the American people should or should not? I mean, are you burdened by heavy secrets and awful things that you know that other people don't know?
I'm not burdened by heavy secrets because all of the secrets that the American people would not want to know about are shared with the surrogate representatives, the special committees of the House and Senate Intelligence Committees, who represent the American people in knowing that we're doing our business correctly and what the major threats to our national security are. The one thing I'm carrying out, but I suppose I'll give to my successor, is the key to the code of the statuary in the courtyard.
I see.
That's a big burden.
I see. Well, Mr. Webster, thank you very much for being with us, and good luck to you, sir.
Thank you, Jim. It's been a privilege.
Still ahead on the NewsHour, Gergen and Shields, kidney dialysis, and homeless kids with cameras. Some end-of-the-week political analysis now from our regular team of Gergen and Shields. David Gergen is editor-at-large at U.S. News and World Report. Mark Shields is a syndicated columnist with the Washington Post. Gentlemen, Judge Webster made it sound as though there isn't going to be much of a debate over the future of intelligence services as he goes and is replaced, possibly with Bob Gates. What do you think, Mark Shields? Do you think this is going to be the occasion of a real examination of whether the nation needs $30 billion worth of intelligence?
No, I don't think it will. I don't think his confirmation will. I think some people will raise it, but I don't think we will get the full debate at this point, primarily because the chairman of the Senate Intelligence Committee, David Boren, is already on record very enthusiastically, emphatically, and strongly for approval and confirmation of Gates.
Do you, David Gergen, do you see such a debate shaping up in the future? I mean, with the decline, the end of the questions Jim was asking Judge Webster.
Sure. Robin, I think that the Gates nomination will not be the occasion, perhaps, for a searching examination for what the future of the CIA ought to be. But I do think that after that nomination, we're going to hear more of that debate. Dave McCurdy in the House, who is come to the forefront on the intelligence side. We'd very much like to re-examine where intelligence ought to be heading. He has questions about whether we are properly equipped on the human side for intelligence, whether we have enough people, for instance, who understand the Arab world in the CIA. I think there are a lot of serious questions about what the CIA's role ought to be in economic security as our focus moves from armed security against the Soviets to the question of economic competition against the Europeans, the Japanese, and others. What should the CIA's role be in that regard? And I think McCurdy and others are going to want to ask those questions.
David, what is the Webster legacy from the CIA?
Robin, I would say that the first and foremost is his legacy from the CIA is the same one he had at the FBI, and that is he cleaned up the agency. He restored the integrity of the agency, and in the process, he restored the relationships between the agency and members of Congress, which is very important to an effective CIA. Beyond that, he did beef up the human intelligence side, and I think you have to give him credit for that. And he also made some of this analysis, as I understand it, more sophisticated on technology and some economic issues. So people looking back at his tenure as a very strong one. He was a 14th and director of the CIA, and in the minds of many people, one of the best.
Mm-hmm. Mark, do you have anything to add to that?
I would only add, Robin, that candor and honesty is certainly a major element of Judge Webster's legacy there. And I would, a candor that got him in trouble occasionally with some intelligence professionals, with some Republican partisans in the White House. And I'd say that the one still dark cloud, and it was that question of the debate over the immediate use of force in the Persian Gulf, where Judge Webster in December had assured the leaders of Congress that the sanctions were working, that in 3 months the Iraqi Air Force would be in big trouble, in 9 months the Army would suffer, and then change that on the morning of the debate.
Yes, well, we just heard his explanation of that.
Right.
Mark, turning to politics, George McGovern said yesterday he decided not to run. That leaves only one Democrat, Paul Tsongas, in the race at the moment. What does it mean? Does it mean the Democrats are courting disaster, or does it mean that it's good tactics for them right now not to have people in the race?
Probably a little of both, Robin. There's nobody. George Bush does not look vulnerable, so there isn't blood in the water that all the Democratic sharks are sensing. He has looked incredibly strong. He's reached new highs, amazing highs in the polls. So that's part of it. The other part is a rather simple one. I think Chairman Ron Brown of the Democratic Party put it well. And that is that nobody being in means that others don't feel the urgency, don't feel compelled. What has occurred in the past in both parties has been what I'd call a sort of a nuclear arms race. If I found out that David was at a junior high graduation speech in Nashua, New Hampshire, then I was going to get my candidate at the J.C. Car Wash in Manchester the next day. It sort of became this, I can, you taught me. The other factor is the Democrats, having lost 5 out of 6 times and lost in landslides in most instances, are going through a period of some soul-searching and some introspection, which I think is probably needed at this point.
David, what do you make of the absence of Democratic candidates right now?
Well, I think Mark has put his finger on one important part of it, and that is the strength of George Bush. A poll in New Hampshire recently among Democrats asking them about 1992 showed Bush beating all Democrats among Democratic voters.
For the Democratic nomination?
Yes, their preference. So I think there are a couple of other things, Robin. One is that Americans are not prepared for a political race right now. You know, after the Persian Gulf War, indeed, I would argue people are almost taking a holiday from the news. We're in a trough right now, and I don't think people are receptive to hearing messages from candidates. They're much more concerned about solving some problems at home. Beyond that, I think the most critical need for the Democrats is not to find a candidate, but to find a message. What's the rationale for replacing George Bush in the White House? And I think they're still struggling to do that.
Mm-hmm. David, some political writers, for instance, Elizabeth Drew in the New Yorker this week, felt that the president's health issue changed the whole political climate psychologically, subtly, but changed it. What do you think about that?
I think it did for it certainly changed the climate with regard to Dan Quayle. We've talked about that before. And I think it made Bush somehow seem a little more vulnerable. There's always that chance now that perhaps his health will stumble. There's no guarantee. Eisenhower had a massive heart attack in 1955 and went on to win a a landslide victory in '56. But I would argue that since that health problem, that the president, the White House have been on the rebound, have done pretty well. I mean, the president won a major victory this week, Robin, on trade, on this question of fast-track authority with regard to Mexico and the GATT negotiations. The Democratic Party, he took that issue away from the Democratic Party. The president, I think with Lamar Alexander at the Education Department, has taken away in the last few days the education issue from the Democrats, as the Republicans are on the offensive for changing the educational system. The Democrats this week came up with an anti-recession package that they themselves admit to a certain embarrassment about, because while it's ambitious in tone, it lacks substance, it lacks detail. So I think that the Democrats really, rather than looking just for a candidate, as important as that is, need to figure out what it is, why should they be in charge? And I think that's the central challenge to the Democrats right now.
David, Mark, do you think that the president's health issue changed the climate at all and made Democrats think that there may be something in '92 that they haven't been thinking until now?
Oh, I think it did, and I think David's absolutely right. The focus on the vice president and the question of the president's own health, and sort of a vulnerability metaphor that set in and has remained there as he's lost 13 pounds and has admitted to not being, as he put it, sharp as a tack. But I would dissent with David on the point of the Republicans. I think both parties are in serious trouble. I think there's a lack. Neither party has a definition. Neither party has generated great enthusiasm in the country. And I think the good part of that is traceable to the demise of Ronald Reagan. Ronald Reagan defined both parties. He put a smiling face on conservatism. He gave the Republican Party a definition. And George Bush really hasn't. George Bush ran as a candidate of continuity. And Reagan also gave the Democrats something to run against. He could, Reagan, his programs, his excesses have appeared to be cruel to widows and orphans. Democrats offered themselves as protectors of those vulnerable groups. So Reagan leaves, and neither party, in my judgment, has a definition at this point.
Robert, can I respond to that?
Sure,
I think that it has been true that through a good deal of the Bush presidency, there has not been much of a domestic agenda that one could point to. I think in education, they finally got that out there front and center. But as a Democratic friend told me yesterday, there's one difference that's beginning to emerge between the parties, and that is a sense of can-do on the part of the Republicans, and you don't sense that with the Democrats. They seem to be overwhelmed with the problems. Problems seem too big for them, and I think they need to get back on track. Just as in the war, Bush projected a can-do spirit in education, he's starting to do that. I do not think the election is over by any chance. I do not think the Republicans ought to take it for granted.
I was just going to ask you about that, David. What are the factors that could make what now looks like just based on the polls at the moment, like a pushover 18 months from now? What are the factors that could make it a close race?
The economy. If we have a double-dip recession, as some are now thinking, if we come up a little bit and go back in again, then I think that this could be a much, much tougher race. Healthcare could help. But on this, there is a sense in the country now that we need to solve domestic problems. It was remarkable this week, Robin, a piece written by Bill Hyland, editor of Foreign Affairs, a leading journal in Foreign Affairs, a frequent guest here on the NewsHour, arguing, as a foreign policy guru, arguing that we should downgrade foreign policy, begin to disengage overseas so that we focus on domestic policy issues. If Bill Hyland is saying that, that means there's an opening for Democrats.
Mark, what do you think could make this, what are the factors that could make this a race?
I think David's absolutely right. A day is a lifetime in politics, and tomorrow is forever. And I think George Bush's support is soft. There is nobody anywhere in America who's walking into a saloon tonight, sitting down next to somebody with a shot and a beer in front of him saying, hey, George Bush is my kind of guy. George Bush has a very high acceptance rate among people, but he generates very little intensity. In a tough race, that becomes a problem, and especially in hard-going politically. I think David is right that the image reshaping that was done in the Persian Gulf will remain with him. No one's going to beat George Bush in 1992 on a wimp charge, but I think certainly an indifference to economic distress could be a very damaging issue against the president in 1992.
So you're both saying it all adds up to the economy at the moment.
I think the economy, I mean, the way the Republicans want to keep the focus, obviously, is upon Bush as commander-in-chief and the warrior in the Persian Gulf. And the Democrats want to bring things back home where Bush's marks, in spite of David's high praise for Lamar Alexander, are not that high.
I've got to move it on, gentlemen. Mark and David, thank you both.
Thank you.
next, a medical debate over the best way to administer life-giving kidney dialysis treatment. Kwame Holman reports.
About 110,000 people in this country depend on dialysis to stay alive. The procedure does what their diseased kidneys cannot. It cleans their blood and removes excess fluid. Kidney patients go on dialysis machines 3 times a week. Each treatment takes 3 or 4 hours. The key to the process is this filter, called a dialyzer. Patients refer to dialyzers as their kidneys. Dialysis would be impossible without them.
I hope I didn't gain him down again.
For one kidney patient, dialyzers are more than a medical matter of life and death. For the last 12 years, Bob Rosen has led a lonely battle against kidney clinics over the increasingly common practice of reusing dialyzers. Rosen charges that reuse of dialyzers puts kidney patients at greater risk of disease and death. He says clinics that clean a patient's dialyzer, then reuse it on that patient, are profiteering from medical care that is the lifeline for kidney patients. Rosen dialyzes at home, where he is sure to get a new dialyzer for each treatment.
I've been on dialysis for 18 years. I was told never reuse. They told me that they didn't really know what would go back into my blood. I've sat next to patients that were on reuse, and I can tell you that they did not feel as well. They all start complaining of cardiac problems, problems in breathing, a more strain on the heart, and that comes because the dialyzer has dead blood in it. It's blocked.
Of the 2,700 dialysis clinics nationwide, more than 68% reuse dialyzers. One of the few clinics that offers new dialyzers for each treatment is near Rosen's home. One patient we talked to, who had been treated at clinics that reused dialyzers, said she feels better here. Helen Moore switched to the single-use clinic.
Whenever I was at the old unit, I sometimes didn't even want to go in for treatment. Now, that's life-threatening. If I don't have my treatment, I know what's going to happen to me.
Moore says she was forced to sign a consent form saying she agreed to have her dialyzer cleaned and reused, or run the risk of not being able to get access to dialysis. Dr. Edward Philippone owns the kidney clinic where she dialyzes now.
I feel that because it is emotionally distressing to a lot of patients, and it is not, in my opinion, medically superior, that they should have the option not to have reuse.
I know that I won't permit reuse on myself, and I feel very nice that this unit's here and it's available, but with 83% of the units in the United States that are reusing, and it's because large corporations are buying them up. And the patients are told you either reuse or you go find another unit.
The federally funded Medicare program pays for dialysis. The annual dialysis bill is nearly $3 billion. Since the reimbursement rate is constant, whether a clinic reuses its dialyzers or not, Rosen believes companies reuse them as a means of saving money. Each new dialyzer costs roughly $10. If a dialyzer can be reused 10 times, a clinic can save $1,000 or more per patient each year.
If I were a dialysis patient, I would request that my artificial kidney be reprocessed.
Dr. Edmund Lowry is president of National Medical Care. The company operates some 300 dialysis clinics. It is the nation's largest chain. National Medical Care says it recommends dialyzer reuse in each of its clinics because reuse is better for patients. The theory that favors reuse says the fibers in the filter become coated with beneficial chemicals of the individual patient's blood. These proteins reduce the damage to white blood cells and reduce the likelihood of chills and nausea during dialysis.
The reason for that is that there is reduced immunologic injury to blood, particularly the infection-fighting cells of blood, when patients are treated with reprocessed dialyzers.
John Newman was a dialysis patient for 16 years before he was given a kidney transplant. He sits on the boards of the National Kidney Foundation and the American Association of Kidney Patients, which represents some 7,000 patients.
Dialyzers, if properly reused according to proper standards and careful monitoring, can be safely and effectively reused. Some work that I participated in, looking at large data sets, has shown that in units which have been reusing dialyzers for 5 or more years, the mortality risk seems to be lower.
The study Newman is referring to was conducted by the Urban Institute in Washington, D.C. After tracking 5,000 patients for 5 years, it showed mortality rates were 12% lower for kidney patients whose dialyzers were being reused. Dr. Lowry of National Medical Care admits reusing dialyzers also has helped clinics maintain profit in the face of reduced rates of federal reimbursement for dialysis. The government paid $138 per dialysis in 1974, but today the rate is just $126.
There's no question that reuse was one of the major ways that the medical community defended against really a very stark reduction in the reimbursements that they receive to care for these patients.
It's $10 per treatment that they're saving. That's going right into their pocket. And if you count that out over a year, we're talking millions of dollars. And if you're talking about a corporation that has all these units, all 300 of them, and they're all practicing reuse, you're talking multi-millions of dollars of profit.
One fear that unites Rosen and the doctors is that the government may further reduce the reimbursement rate for dialysis, something they all agree could lead to a reduction in the quality of care. Rosen worries that such a cut would mean clinics, in turn, would lower the standards for the quality and training of their staff. Dialysis clinic owner Dr. Philippone agrees.
If they continue to drop this rate, they are definitely going to have an impact on the quality of care, whether it be reuse, whether it be a decrepit building, poor staffing, whatever. And that is the real issue.
Rosen and other patients say clinics should at least allow patients to choose whether they want their dialyzer reused, as clinics in Washington, D.C. recently were required to do by city officials there. But dialysis providers say that if enough patients choose single-use and half switch to single-use in Washington, D.C., that alone could drive up the cost of care.
Somewhere around 70-75% of all patients now are reprocessing dialyzers, and if you drop that down to 30 or 35%, the costs could be absolutely astronomical, and for no good medical reason.
Bob Rosen says cost should not be the deciding factor.
In the minimum, give us a choice. Maximum, ban it until we get scientific studies. And until they do that, I'm not going to stop. And I will never subject myself to reuse. Not unless they can sit me down and show me it's sterile. Show me it's sterile, I'll do it. Until that day, don't show me. Don't even ask me.
Advocates of federal legislation that would let kidney patients choose new or reused filters say the legislation was set back by the recent death of one of its proponents, Senator John Hines of Pennsylvania.
Finally tonight, Judy Woodruff reports on a Washington photographer whose focus is children.
On a typical afternoon in Washington, Jim Hubbard directs a group of 8 or so inner-city children as part of his project to teach them photography and other creative skills. Many of the children are homeless. They all come from so-called at-risk backgrounds. Twice a week, Hubbard sends a van to various shelters around the city to pick up the kids and bring them to this 2-room basement office, where they work with him and with other professionals who volunteer their time. This job is a far cry from what Hubbard used to do. As a news photographer, he covered the White House and other big political stories in the nation's capital. But struck by contrasts he saw in the prosperous early 1980s, he also started taking pictures of the homeless. In 1986, he quit his job with United Press International, went to work on a master's degree in divinity, and began documenting the plight of the homeless full-time. Not long ago, a book of his photographs titled American Refugees was published.
This is my brother, Robert.
But in recent months, it's the work of the children he's taught that has captured the attention of the national media. This photo exhibit was named Shooting Back by one of the kids, who said it's his way of dealing with the life he was handed. On a national tour, the exhibit is at the Denver Children's Museum. Hubbard had asked the children to document their lives within a block of where they stay. The result? Pictures of children at play and couples kissing, as well as grim images of poverty and violence, has been widely acclaimed. Hubbard says his reward has been discovering the spirit in each child, a spirit he says he had not expected.
I would have hoped, from my perspective, that more of the travesty, the injustice of homelessness would have been brought forth by the children. But I learned rather quickly that's not their view. Their view is they have a life, they have joy, they have a very resilient human spirit, they have friends, they have wishes, dreams, and ambitions. That's what comes through in their photographs. More than the travesty and injustice of homelessness, of poverty. But the strong and dynamic human spirit, the joy in the life of a child that is not squashed in spite of being economically deprived.
Somebody who is very cynical might say, well, that's great. You give these kids a chance to show off their talents, their genius at taking pictures, but in fact, have you really changed anything about their lives? Have you changed something real about the way they go about their daily existence? What have you really accomplished?
We hope so. Hopefully we're offering something that can change lives in a profound way. I mean, when you offer a piece of bread to a beggar, or you offer a quarter to a beggar, that may get the person through the next hour or two, but what about the next day? I mean, there has to be a lot of things passed on to a person who's in need. Not just money, not just food, but an idea that you're important, we accept you into our community, and we want the best for you in our community. Cynicism regarding this topic, I mean, nobody's a greater cynic than I am about many things, but I think the cynics, the real cynics, are the people that would prevent opportunities for the least of us, the poorest among us, that would prevent those opportunities. I say throw everything possible at the people who have little to give them the same opportunities that the rest of us have.
How is what these kids deal with here different from what they face every day in their lives and what they see at home in their neighborhood and so forth?
All the kids that we work with have seen violence. They've seen killings. Many of the kids that we've met and we work with lived at Capital City Inn, and they were there when a father killed his two children, murdered his two children. They were there when kids were claimed in fires in their rooms when their mothers left them. They've seen a lot of violence, and they live in homes where sometimes their own father or their own mother has been stabbed because of $10 or whatever. They live in homes where sometimes the parents, not all the kids, but alcoholism and drug abuse runs at a very high level in the marginalized community. We've been in homes picking up kids where their mother's falling down drunk, and it's very sad for me to see that. The kid comes here, it's a safe haven even if for a couple hours, and hopefully we're offering and opening up new opportunities for the child. Unfortunately, the child has to go back to the parent who's drunk or using drugs, and that's a tragedy. A lot of what comes out when they write or draw or paint here, a lot of what comes out is violence. A lot of symbols of violence. The kids talk about guns a lot. The kids talk about violence a lot, an awful lot, enough to scare me how much it's in their conversation, how much it's in the work they're creating, the paintings and the writing, sometimes even what they take pictures of. The violence of the communities they live in is obviously very much on their mind.
Does the system as it now works make it easier or more difficult to pull off a project like this? Why aren't there more things like this, whether it's photography or something else?
I thought this was a simple project to start. My initial intention was having a photo exhibit, highlighting the genius and the beauty and the creativity of the children, and also holding up to the American public the idea of homelessness and children who need help in America. That was my idea in the beginning. Now I have a nonprofit organization, so we have a project now that's very complicated. We have to raise a lot of money to keep it going. We have to have a vehicle to pick up the kids. We have to pay insurance to the tune of $2,500 a year on the vehicle to pick up the children. And it's I think it's a constant nightmare. The idea of organizing a simple idea to make it happen to help people. The system really is sort of against, this is a big statement, but the system really is kind of against one doing that because of the complications, the enormous obstacles that come up. If I want to do good, there's a lot out there that can stop me. And I do want to do good, not because I'm a do-gooder, but because I believe in fighting the injustice out there. And therefore, I'm out to help the children, to fight the injustice out there. Trying to stay focused on your question. It's a never-ending battle to sustain a simple little idea of which a program develops out of. If I want to work with several kids, 5 kids, for example, and I go and I try and get money to do this, to foundations, they'd rather, and I don't want to badmouth foundations, but they'd rather hear I'm working with 500 kids. 5 wouldn't be enough. They want 500. Now, how am I going to work with 500 kids in a center like this that's very small? But the bigger the program, the better my chances are for money. The bigger the program, probably the less I can do to really help a kid. So I want to stay small, but staying small sometimes gets in the way of possibilities for raising money. So that's one of the obstacles. That's an example of one of the obstacles. There are many others. When you got a human being like me and many other people who say, I don't care about all the great things in the world, I want to help marginalized children or marginalized people, it's too bad it's so damn hard to do that. You know what I mean? It's too bad. It's really sad. It's an indictment against this society that one would have to work so hard to make something happen to help other people. That's my own personal struggle with trying to help other people.
I think a lot of people feel we've done homelessness. We've heard a lot about it over the years, and we'd like to think that it's either gotten better or somehow it's at a state that we don't need to worry about anymore. They don't really want to hear much about it anymore.
The media, I know, is tired of it because I've heard it enough times through media that they're very tired of homelessness. They're not interested in the homeless. It's not a sexy issue. The war was very helpful in removing anything about economic injustice in the U.S., including homelessness. It was very helpful at eradicating that whole problem. But the war's over now. America feels good, and we've still got homeless. We had an undercount reported the other day about the existence of the numbers of the homeless, but people still view most homeless people as those people on the streets panhandling, when in fact there are hundreds of thousands of people who are members of families, who are in shelters, who are in cars, who are in parks, who the public don't ever see.
Why is this important? You acknowledge yourself that you can really only touch the lives of a few kids here and a few kids there and maybe a few more down the line. But why is it so important if the impact is on so few?
It was the reality that the word covenant, I went to divinity school, I got a master's of divinity, so I know some theological terms. The word covenant from the Old Testament, covenant, we have a covenant with several kids in this community. I have an extended family here now. I mean, they're not blood or anything like that, but I have an investment, and they have an investment with me. And that is about love, and that is about community, and that is about the government isn't doing its job. Many of the churches aren't doing their job, and I don't want to sound like I'm attacking everybody out there, but individuals like myself or like other people who help us here, we have to try and turn things around in this society, because in my view, it's a very sick society, it's a very imbalanced society, and the goods are being taken away from more and more people, and we have to band together and help each other.
I didn't intend for this to be a political discussion, but what you said made me think back to George Bush's 1,000 points of light. Are you one of the points of light?
I am absolutely not one of the 1,000 points of light. I detest the idea. Volunteerism doesn't really work. People need to be paid. They need pay, money. This is capitalism. This is the USA. People deserve to be paid to help other people. The heroes. Let's talk about heroes for a second. The heroes aren't necessarily, I don't acknowledge the heroes from the Middle East. I acknowledge the heroes that are here in D.C., in Detroit, in the Bronx, New York, who are fighting the war that's been going on there for years, trying to save our children and our families who are struggling. Volunteerism is okay to a certain extent, but people need to be paid. It needs to be a value and a priority of our society to pay people to help other people, like teachers, like social workers, to help save the children that we're working with.
Jim Hubbard, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Again, the major stories of this Friday. Thousands of mourners attended the funeral of former Indian Prime Minister Rajiv Gandhi, who was assassinated on Tuesday. The U.S. Senate voted to grant President Bush so-called fast-track authority to negotiate a trade agreement with Mexico, and Israel began an airlift of as many as 18,000 Ethiopian Jews. The U.S. government intervened with the Ethiopian government to make it possible. Good night, Robin.
Good night, Jim. That's the News Hour for tonight. We'll be back Monday night with a major focus on a threatened generation, America's young black males. I'm Robert MacNeil. Have a nice weekend.
Funding for the News Hour has been provided by PepsiCo. Every day we enjoy people being cold to us, cutting us up,